Hi everyone, I'm Blake Jones, and welcome to our online training series. This course is an introduction to Resolve and aimed at those just getting started with Resolve. You'll learn the workflow sequence in Resolve and how the various sections can work together to achieve the best result. Before we get started, it's important to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in the film industry and have been working as a colorist for over 30 years. I started out in Hollywood grading features such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, Poltergeist, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, to name only a few of the 137 titles I worked on. I then moved on to grading TV shows and eventually commercials. Before you start with your color grading, you need to think about several items. First, your color grading environment. Colored walls in the grading room can influence your color perception. Also, your room lighting needs to be taken into account. You should have a lighting that does not influence your color perception in any way. The next step is to consider a color grading panel. The control surface that you see here is the DaVinci Resolve Advanced Control Panel, but there are other panels available at different prices and functionality. If you see yourself doing extensive color grading, then you really should consider a grading panel instead of just using a mouse. With this in mind, let's get started. Hi everyone. Okay, so let's get started with the first thing we want to do is actually download the Resolve application. So we do this, as you can see here, by just coming over to the support page of Blackmagic, navigate over to the tab for DaVinci Resolve. We click on that, scroll down, and you'll see all the various versions of Resolve that are available, also the manual configuration guide. The configuration guide is very useful when you're going to set up a brand new computer to be used with Resolve. You can see what specs you need to adhere to. And then what we have here is we have Resolve 16.2, which is the latest version that we're going to be working with. And then we have on the bottom 3 buttons. We can select either Mac OS X, Windows, or Linux. So what we do here, in this case, I'm going to select Mac OS X. Now this will, if we select DaVinci Resolve 16.2 Update, this will download the free version. So as you can see, the difference with the free version is you must fill out your address details and everything. Now if you want to download the paid version, this would be DaVinci Resolve Studio. Now, Resolve Studio works in several different licensing modes. So, for example, if you have the dongleware version, this means that you have to have a dongle plugged into the computer when you're going to be using it. There's also the license key version. This is a little sort of credit card looking plastic card that you receive with a license key on there. This can be used on 2 computers at the same time. And then if you have the DaVinci Resolve Advanced panel, there is also an advanced dongle, and this will actually unlock certain codecs on the Linux version for use with QuickTime ProRes encoding. So what I'm going to do here is actually download the Mac OS X version, and then if you want to, you can actually come over and put down your details. If not, you can just select download only, which is what I'm going to do here. And then it starts to download automatically. And then you can see here is the download that is actually happening at that time. Okay, now once that's done, the download will appear. And then here what I've done is I just moved it to my desktop. Now the first thing I want to do is double click on this, and now I have the actual installation screen. Now what it gives me here is the operator manual, an uninstall program, and also the installation program. Now when I'm going to install this, just double click for a second. Okay, and then it verifies it. And then after that, you'll see here for a second. And now we have the installation screen. So we then click on Continue. Now on here you've got your indication of all the new things that are actually in this version. And then you can also then continue here, and then this is the licensing agreement, and you say continue, and then it asks you to agree to that. Now on the Mac version works slightly different than on the Windows version, because you have a customize button here. If you do this, if you want to install things such as the PostgreSQL server, you can select that. If you want to install the audio accelerator, if you have an audio accelerator card for the Fairlight Audio or the Fairlight Studio utility. And also this will give you the opportunity to upgrade your Blackmagic RAW player and things like that you can put in. And then if I select install now, then I just add my password, and off it goes. Now the installation process, whether it be on a Mac system or a Windows system, is quite similar. And so you will have a similar installation screen. The only difference is that if you want to install things such as the PostgreSQL database manager software, it's actually done on the straight on the installation screen when you're working with a Windows system. Okay, so once it's finished here, you'll see it's just about done. And it validates the packages, and then it says the installation was successful. And then we can close this. Okay, so that's closed. Then we can close our installer, eject the installation script, and now that's off. So now everything is there. I have, if I want to keep this software, I can store it away if I need it for whatever purpose. So what I'm going to do is just stick it in my media folder, put it away, and then here, the next thing I want to do here is come down to my dock area. So we start just by clicking in the dock. Comes over and you can see the status here on the screen. So the splash screen is telling me what is being loaded at that time, so we can see how things are progressing here on the system. Once it gets finished, you'll see last thing, it's loading waveform monitor. And it says ready, and now you'll get into the database manager. Okay, now before we get started, it's important to actually look at the database manager. The SQL or the disk database, these are two different types of database managing systems. A disk database is not used for sharing databases. The SQL can be on a separate computer, and you can use this for sharing databases to other users, for example, if you want to do collaboration workflow, for example. So, for example, what we're going to do on this situation, we'll create a disk database, and we come over here, and I want to create a disk database in this situation. So there are two buttons on the top here. You have one that says connect. That's to connect to an existing database, or you have create to create a new database. So we want to select create. We want to make a disk database, and I want to call it Blake. Okay. Good. And then I want to select the directory location. And then what it does here is it will give me the location where I want it to go, and then I want to create a folder for it. And we'll call it Resolve Database. Okay. Enter, open, create. Okay, so now we have a blank database. Now the database stores all the parameters for your project. So it's always important that you back up your database when, say, once a month or something like that. And on the top here you have several buttons. So as you can see, this one is to back up your database. This one is to restore the database. If you want to create a SQL database, it's essentially the same situation. You come over here, you come to New Database, Create, select SQL, and then you can have the name, and as you can see, it's defaulting to the IP address of the loop-through for this computer. If you were doing it, for example, on another computer, you can actually use the IP address of that computer and then store it, provided that you have a network connection to that computer. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, normally this procedure when you're just getting started with Resolve is not required, because the system by default automatically creates a local database file for you here. So this is something for you to get started with. This is just in case you want to create multiple databases and to understand what the database does. The database stores, as I said, all the metadata for your project, all the parameters, everything there is all stored. Not the media, it's only just the metadata. So as you can see here, if I come back to my Blake database, I have an untitled project here, and it shows me with a checkbox, and that indicates that that is the project that is loaded currently without a title. If I come up to the top here, I can either see the thumbnails, or I can see it in text mode, like so. So what I want to do here is create a new project on the bottom, and select this, and we'll call it training. Okay. And then the first thing it does is it brings me directly to the cut page on Resolve. Now if I return back to the project manager, as you can see, my untitled project has now been renamed Training. On the bottom here we have another button here that says New Folder. This is in case you're working on a multi-part program, a very long project, and you want to separate it into individual project files. You can create a folder for the name of the project, and then you can put all the individual files in there. Okay, so let's close the database manager, and the first thing we want to do is we want to get some media that we're going to use for our project. So as you can see here, if I come to my media page, I can see all the contents of the media that I'm using here. Now if I want to come over here and let's look at this one, for example, and then I can then come over here and let's come over here like so, and then I can see this red file that I have. Now before we actually start loading media, it's important to go over the parameters for the basically the configuration for our project is probably the best way to put it. So what I want to do first is come to Preferences, and then as you can see on the top here, it will show me the graphic cards that are attached, how much RAM that I have. This is a relatively small system. As you can see, it just has two little Quadro 4000s in there. And then we've got our storage area, and then we have here decode options video I/O. I'm using a Decklink card for my graded outputs to my grading monitor, and then we have our control panels that we're using, and then also other preferences such as configuration of my YouTube account or Vimeo account if I want to upload directly to there. So the next thing we want to do here is as you can see, the preferences are separated between system and user. So if I go to user, I can select the language. So for example, if I want to change it for Japanese or Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, French, or Russian, I can change all that stuff in there. Normally we just leave it in English. And then this is very important, the project save and load, live save and project backups, and then this will automatically save your project. So if you have a system crash for whatever reason, when you restart, you'll always pick up where you left off, and so that's always important. Next thing we come over here is all the parameters for color mode. Basically, one of the most important things in this area is if you're going to do HDR grading, you can actually change the scope so they're registering in SD2084 and HLG actually, so you can see it there in that area. So next thing we come up to here is sensitivity for my control panels, and then metadata settings, which we cover more actually if you're doing an advanced course, for example. And then also user interface settings. Basically all these should be as they are. Okay, so once we have everything here sorted out, these are just the basic things that we want to have sorted for this section. Now, the next thing we come down to is on the lower right of the GUI, there is a little gear, and this will open up my project settings. So this would be the resolution for the project that I'm working on. It's important that you get this all set up before you start putting media into your media pool. So for example, video monitoring, let's do this at 25. And then we come over here, change the frame rate here to 25. So now we're at a 25 frame project. That's my resolution for my project that I'm going to work with. And then here I can select all the other options, such as where my cache clips are being stored, gallery clips or gallery frames being stored. And then also color management in this area. So for example, if you come to color management, you've got DaVinci YRGB Color Manage, and ACES. For just this basic getting started tutorial, we're going to just stick with the basic DaVinci Luminance RGB color science. And down on the bottom is what we have, whether we're going to work with HDR or Dolby Vision, and then also if we're going to be using separate lookup tables. When you're putting lookup tables, you can either do it on a project basis, or you can actually do it on a node basis, or on a clip basis can be put in. So in this situation, as you can see, you have a 1D, or you have a 3D, which would be basically on an RGB basis. 1D would be basically on a luminance basis that you're doing. And then if you want to import lookup tables from external sources, you can then click on the Open LUT folder, drop your LUTs into the appropriate folder, and then once you've closed that, you just come over here and select Update Lists, and then they will be visible within your pull-down menu when you bring those up. So as you can see, if I have a 1D LUT, it's basically log to linear and stuff like this. But if you have a 3D LUT, because it's an RGB one, then it's going to be far more comprehensive in what it can do. And you can put lookup tables either on the input, the output, or the display. So the display is split between monitor, viewer, and scopes. Down here we also have what we call broadcast safe. The broadcast safe area, this is to make sure that your levels, your chroma levels and video levels in general are within a broadcastable limit. And this is essentially, for example, if you're going to be exporting to a broadcaster and it needs to be in their, constrained within their broadcast safe limits. Once you get finished with anything in here, you always have to remember to click on Save button on the bottom. Okay, next one we come up to here is our conform options. So if we're going to be conforming using an EDL or an XML, we can have different parameters we can change here. And then we also have our camera raw settings here. So we're really not going to cover too much of this in the basic, because this is effectively only if you're going to be shooting in camera raw formats. Okay, so once we got everything set up there, now we can come up to here and start looking for our class content. So what I'm going to do here is, let's just say, let's take all these files here. So it's important to look here on the left-hand side. As you can see, will show me the folder structure, and on this side is actually the file structure. So for example, here, if I want to take this file, or this folder rather, and move its entire contents into here, this will move this into the media pool. I'm only creating a link to the file. I'm not actually moving the file. Now, at this moment, this particular project was done in a different frame rate than what I'm set up for. So it asked me, do I want to change the clips to the frame rate of the, or do I want to change the project to the frame rate of the clip? So you can either select change or don't change. And then if you don't change, then it will basically adapt them to the speed that you've actually selected there. So once I select this, everything here now is selected into my media pool area. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm not actually moving the clips, but I'm actually just creating a link to them. Now, as we look on the bottom here, we can see that this is simply an audio track, and then these are my video files for the particular project. Now, if I look on here, this one shows me a little musical note on the left, and then there's a little box on the right. Okay, the musical note tells me actually that there's audio associated with this particular clip, and the little square says, if I click on that, this gives me all the information for this clip, basically the metadata for this. So it shows me the codec that's being used, the audio codec when it was created, and it shows me the pixel aspect ratio and the speed. And also the resolution. So this is a 720p file, so that's fine. Now also, when I click on a clip, that same metadata will also be visible here on the right hand side. And then also it gives me more details in that area. And then if I play it, I can see here my peak meters, and then also the waveform for the sound for that particular clip. In this area here, I can also look at the visualization of the clips in the media pool by thumbnails or by list. And then you can also change the sort mode too in this area. And then also too, I can come over here and look at, I can add multiple media pools this way. So if I want to do it this way, I can sort like this, for example. Now on the left side are my bins. So these are, for example, let's say if I wanted to take gnarly and pink, and I want to keep the bin structure for that, I can take gnarly and pink, drag it down here, and now I have a bin for gnarly and pink. And if I click on that, I will see the individual clips that are in this area. If I click on the master bin, it shows me here the clips that are associated with the master bin. Now on the bottom, we have what we call smart bins. Now smart bins, for example, here you can do different sorts by keywords, or as you can see, let's add a smart bin, and then you can say the media pool properties, the camera, the name, anything like that can be used to create my sort, and you can say match any, match none, or anything like that can be done. Okay, then on the top right here we've got, as we mentioned, audio, metadata, and then we have capture button. The capture is only used if you're using the Blackmagic Design film scanner. As you can see, there's a separate tab for that. Or if you have a video source in the decklink card connected so that you can capture video coming in. So as you can see here, if I select the film scanner, it says no scanner detected because there's not one there. Okay, so that's essentially what we call getting the material in. Now we have on the top left here, we have a little button here called the clone tool. The clone tool is designed to copy data off a drive to your local attached storage or your internal RAID or whatever that might be. So for example here, if I come back to preferences and I select here my media storage, there's a little checkbox here, automatically display attached local and network storage locations. If this is checked, anything that is attached to the computer will show up in this area. Now if this is not checked, only this particular link will come up here, so you will only be able to open that one. So generally we usually leave this open checked, and then this way when somebody brings me a drive and says, okay, can you copy this over to my storage, you just plug it in, go through, and then you can come over here and use the add a clone job, and effectively here you add your source folder and your destination folder on your internal or your direct attached RAID storage where you can copy it so you can work on it much better. So what happens is once you have the two locations set, you select clone, and then it will actually copy it over. And then if you click on the top right, you have a option here where it says checksum type, and then you can select the checksum type. Normally it's an MD5 by default, and that's usually fine. And this will indicate to you when you're finished that the actual clone has been completed successfully. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to now move over here to the cut page. Okay, the cut page is relatively new in Resolve 16. And so as you can see here, we have our media pool area, we have our viewer, and then we have our timeline here. And so what we do here is, if we click on this particular clip, you can come over and select my endpoints there, and then let's come over here and let's come to here, something like that, and select your out point, and then let's F9 brings it in the timeline. I'm ready to go, and now I can move on to my next shot, and then I come over here and say, okay, let's come to here, something like that, come in to here, come to this one here, come to out, and then let's come over here, adds that in there now. And then I can do this all the way through, and then as you can see, I've got my way I can go through and preview that. Now here we've got play backwards, forwards, loop mode, and then also we have a nice little jog control just by clicking on this particular control and dragging your mouse backwards and forwards like so. Okay, so then if we come here, if I click on this button, the Tools button, this will allow me to do all the functions like resizing, and I can go through and change the color in this area if I want to. And if I want to change audio levels for this particular clip, I can do this on a clip basis like so. And then I can also go fast forward using this control if I want to. Now on the top area here, these are different navigation controls. So this one will show me for the source clip. This is the source tape. So this shows me all the different clips that I have in the media pool all together. And then we have this one, which is my, so as you can see when I move to this one, it will tell me this is my timeline for this particular one. So getting back to this here, as you can see by moving the cursor here, I can see source clip, source tape, and timeline in this area. And then if I come up to the right area here, I can select the project settings. I can change this for this particular project. So this is a quick way to change between Ultra HD, Full HD, Portrait mode if I want to export to Instagram, or if I want to do a square export for whatever purpose, or I can do custom project settings as well. And now on the second part here, this is color science. I can change this to DaVinci YRGB or YRGB Color Manage or ACES. And then if I want to bypass whatever color grading settings I have, I can do this as a bypass function here. Now on the top right, we have what we call the quick export. Quick export will allow me to export directly to YouTube Vimeo, or I can do just a quick H.264 or ProRes or H.265 export as well. And by clicking this, it means that I can export directly from this page without having to go to the Deliver page, which is the conventional way of exporting from Resolve. Okay, so on the top here, we have also, I can see my different bins inside the system, inside the media pool rather. And then if I want to add media, I can do at this point. And then if I want to import a media folder, I can do it from here as well. If I want to sync clips, I can do this. And then if I want to add transitions, so for example, let's say I want to come back up to here and I want to add a transition, I can then add whatever I want to at this point. The other option is so if I come over here and let's just do a band wipe like so. And then I do a wipe to that particular clip. We also have too, if I want to put titles in the picture. Now, titles inside Resolve are handled in two different ways. Some titles are handled via Fusion, and some are just the conventional title generator within Resolve. Anything with a little lightning bolt inside is actually the Fusion titles, and anything without is the ones that are being done within Resolve. So as you can see, things like scroll and text and these conventional things are not being used together with Fusion. But for example, let's say if I want to add this title in, I just take it over here, drag it into the window, and then this will at first, because the title has to render, it will take a few seconds before you can actually play it back at a full speed. Now what happens then is that you can then come over here and now and then you can actually see what you've actually done at that point. Also within these areas too, if you right mouse click on a clip, you can change clip colors, clip attributes. Clip attributes is, for example, if you want to change the aspect ratio between CinemaScope and non-anamorphic formats, can be done at this point. You can also change the field dominance, frame rate, audio parameters, time code, name, everything like that can be done inside this area. Okay, so what we've been looking at here now is we looked at the cut page, which is our very basic way of doing quick editing. Now if we move next to the edit page, you can see the entire edit in a completely different view. So in this way I can come over here to the top, open up my media pool, look at my clips, and then if I come over here, let's just switch off the inspector, I can preview different clips here, play that through, and then I can come up to here and click on this one for example, and then we can come over here and say okay, I want to come and mark an in point there and then mark an out point there. So in and out points on both pages can be easily marked by just using the I and the O on the keyboard. Now you have an additional function on here. As you can see, when you move the cursor into the viewer, it allows you to select audio here or video here. Now if you just take the whole picture, you can just drag from here and say drag it to the right side, and now this little set of windows opens up. We can insert, overwrite, replace, fill, place on top, or append to end, which means it'll just put it on the end of the timeline. Okay, we add it to the end, and as you can see, there's my picture and my sound there at this point. And then now what we want to do here is let's just take this one and look at this one like so. We say okay, put an in point there, come to here, out point at that point, and then we come over the same thing, append it to the end like so. So now we've got our small conform that we've created here, complete with titles. Now this one, now as you can see, we created a Fusion title, but we haven't put any text in there. It's still got the default text. So to change text on Fusion, all you do is you come up to the text information in your edit timeline, click on it, go to Inspector, and then all we have to do here is then select Main Text, and then as you can see here it says Text on a Shelf, and we'll call this Bike Shop. So now that's done, and then here you can change the text color, size, everything like that can all be changed in that area. Now you'll see a little blue line that appears on the top here of this area that we've highlighted for the text information. As you can see, it's turning blue readily, and what that's doing is now telling us that that's actually been rendered already. Okay, so now we want to do a little color correction on it. But before we do that, it's important to come over and look at the Fusion page. Okay, the Fusion page gives us our, as you can see, if I see the clips on the bottom here, and each one I click on will allow me to see a media in and media out. And then if I want to add effects, I can do that here through the effects library. And then so what I do here is I've got my effects tools that can be added into the Fusion area. Now Fusion is something that we're actually going to go through a little bit more in the later modules. And so let's continue on then to the color page. Now in the color page, we've got first the gallery area, which allows us an image reference. We've got our viewer, so we can see the result of anything we're doing, and we have our node graph display. So as you can see, there is a link here from the input to the node to the output to the final option, to the final corrected information. So as you can see here, if I come over and do a correction like this, and if I break the node tree in any way, so I just eliminate the link, you see my correction goes away. If I redraw the link back to here, correction comes back. Okay. So we have two types of color correction. We have primary color correction, which is the entire picture, And then we also have secondary color correction. And so secondary is for highlighting different items that you want to accentuate the color on in the shot. So for example, let's not start with, well, yeah, let's start with this shot. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we look down in the lower right and we have our scopes. Now the scopes, if we expand those, you can now see here that there are 4 scopes available to us. We have our parade display, our waveform monitor, histogram, and vector scope. Vector scope is for measuring the color information in our picture. Waveform monitor is for a culmination of luminance and chrominance information together. And the parade display allows us to see the information for the red, green, and blue signal. And so, for example, on the bottom would be the dark information or the lift. Top would be the gain. Okay. Now on the bottom right, we have the histogram. A histogram for basic color correction we don't use so much. But then we also have the ability that we can change this fourth display to show our chromaticity, so I can see our color space for the Rec 709 color space that we're working with for this particular project. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is close this window and go back to looking at our integrated scopes now within the color page. So the first thing I want to do is I look at the picture, and if I look at the picture here, I can see a little bit bigger viewer by doing Alt F, and if I do Command F, will give me a full screen image. Okay, so what I want to do now is I look at the screen, or the viewer rather, look at my parade display, and I see that the lift area is not bad. It's got a little bit of contamination of color, but not a tremendous amount. The gain information looks relatively balanced. Now if I want to see this a little bit brighter, I can then come up to here and I can come in and let's just come into this guy here and just change the brightness, and it makes it a little bit easier to see then. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I go to the lift area and balance the lift. And this is the dark area. So you can see if I put too much red information in the lift area, it gets red in the low lights. And if I put too much blue, everything in the low lights becomes blue. So I want to have that balanced. So basically balanced indicates to me that all 3 channels are at the same level. Okay, next thing I want to do here is bring this down a bit and then bring the gain up. So now as you can see, our picture is starting to look brighter. Now what happens then is if I adjust the gain control, this will adjust the color of the gain information in the picture. So as you can see, if I move this towards blue, everything in the light areas becomes blue or becomes red, depending on the position here in this display. Now if I have this leveled out, as you can see now it becomes more neutral. So as you can see, what happens here is that by adjusting the gain wheel, it brings the gain up, and then by changing the control in the center, I can change the color of the gain. Okay, so now what happens next is I want to create my look. I can do this by doing the gamma control. So as you can see, now I've added more warmth in the picture, which is fine. But since there is a bit of interactivity between the gain and the lift area, we need to now go back to the lift and readjust that just a little bit. So now we have our nice correction. We want to make it a little bit more dense in that area and then bring the gain up a little more. We want to bring that up a little more like so. Okay. So now that's looking better, and now that looks like what we want. Now what we could do is actually add a little extra color to it. And now, as you can see, now we have a good grading for this particular shot. Okay, so now, next thing we want to do is let's move on to our next shot here. And we say, okay, this one probably need to do a correction for this. Now there is a little control here. This is our auto color correction controls. So if we take this one and we click on this and move it to the dark areas and click on that, it automatically uses this as my balance for adjusting the lift area. And the other function here, if I click on the white cursor and move it to the light area and click on that, it gives me an adjustment for the light areas of the picture. Okay, this is not really the recommended way of doing it, but if you want to do a quick correction, this is the way you can actually start off if you want. And then what I can do then is then bring my lift up and then balance the lift area and then bring the gain down out of clip. And now I look at that, and that's looking pretty good now. And then we can come over here and adjust that. Now what happens is that if I come back to this shot, I want to save this as a color reference. So what I can do is grab a still for that, and then come to here, and now come over here, click on the wipe control on the upper left, and then I can wipe across to this. Now as you can see, this is a bit more magenta here, so let's just take a little magenta out using the gamma control, and then we're in pretty good shape. And then bring that around, maybe bring our lift up a little bit like so. Good. Okay, so then we bring that into there. And that's looking good. Then we can turn our wipe function off, and then we can move to here and say let's copy this color correction into this scene. Very easily done by just center mouse clicking on this particular clip. As you can see, the color correction has been instantly transposed into this one. And so we take that, and then we come back to here, we look at this one, and we say, okay, now if we come to a correction, as you can see here, we did a trial earlier on a color correction, and we want to reset it. To reset a color correction in Resolve is very simple. As you can see here, come to Color, go to Reset, All Grades and Nodes, and here are the keyboard shortcuts for it. And here are the keyboard shortcuts for it. This takes us down to one node now. And now what I can do is, if I want to, I could take the color correction from this one and plug it in from the gallery image simply by dragging the gallery image to here until I see the little plus indicator appear. Let go. And now I've got the color correction for that on this shot. Of course, it doesn't really work for this particular shot, so it gives me something to start off with. So what I'm going to do next is bring this up like here, balance the lift a bit, bring the gain, make it more balanced, as you can see, level it up, and then here, bring it all the way up to the top. Bring it like so. And now we've got a good starting point for us to start with here. Now we've compressed the image a little too much in this shot. It's a little too dark in that area. So let's just open it up a bit like so. Okay, so next thing we do is we come back to this shot here and we say, okay, I want to copy the color correction from this scene into here. what we can do here is we can actually come over here and just you can copy a color correction by Command C, and then you can come here and then do Command V, and it will copy the color correction from this shot into this. This is another way of working too. Now what we want to do next is as you can see, the picture is a little too green. It's there. So we want to balance that out a bit. Bring that across like so. Want to bring that across like so. Now we've got all of our color corrections done. What I always do is save my project, do Command S to save it. Okay, so next tab over is our Fairlight audio page. We can work on the audio here in this area, but we can also work on it within the edit page as well. So we'll look at this more in the later modules. Okay. So then finally what we want to do is we want to export our entire project. So we've got our different clips that we've color graded, and we've got our titles and transitions and everything like that. And so we can either make our custom configuration, or we can say I want to export this for YouTube. So we'll say do it in 720p on YouTube, and we'll call this Biker. So Biker is there. Then we come over here and we select where we want it to go, and I say okay, I want this on my media drive. Add it to the render queue, start my render. Now render speed on Resolve will depend upon the type of GPUs you're using, and also the codec that you're actually going to be rendering at. And of course the resolution. Now if you have a lot of effects, for example noise reduction will slow down the render process. Defocus will slow down the render process. And of course the higher the resolution, if you have small graphic cards and things like that, it will be a little bit slower. Now once you get finished with the render, then it will appear as the whatever format you've designated in the storage location. So in my case it's on my media drive. Now in this indicator here, this shows me the actual render job that I'm working on, and this will show me the time until it is actually finished. And it shows me here that I've got color correction information on all clips except for the title, the Fusion titles, which I actually put in as well. On the top here, this shows us whether we want to see the clips here in this area, if we're going to be exporting to tape. For example, if we have a tape machine connected with a decklink card, it will show up here. And then also this is to indicate our render settings. Okay, so it looks like we'll be finished here with this in 1 minute. Okay. Okay, so now we're just about coming to the end of the render of this particular project. And then what I'm going to do now is, okay, there we go. So it shows me the project is completed, the render is done, and then if I minimize the project, open up my media folder, and there I can see my biker video, which has been rendered here. And it shows me the size of the file. It's a QuickTime file, for example. And then if I open it up, I can see what's going on, you know, and I've got here like so. Okay, so there we have it. So for more information about training services, make sure and have a look in the comments below. And also for more tips and tricks, make sure and have a look at our other YouTube videos. And also, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Think about subscribing to my Patreon channel. And I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Thanks a lot.